Sometimes, it's fun to go back and revisit old FNaF theories. A few months ago, I even started a series where I do just that with my own old FNaF theory videos, but this isn't a part of that series. Instead, in this video, I'm actually going to be going over everything from the original Five Nights at Freddy's, the very first game, and solve all the mysteries in it with modern knowledge and using evidence from more recent content. By now, this game has pretty much already been solved, but with this video, I want to not only discuss what happens in the game, but also what happens around the game. Everything about the player and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and stuff like that will all be discussed in this video. I'll be talking about some stuff I've already talked about before, explaining some new things in new ways, and also compiling a couple clips of me explaining stuff from previous videos. Only 2 of those though. I also did a video recently that was all about Phone Guy, which was originally going to be part of this video, but I thought it was a good idea to separate that, but if you'd like to, you can also go watch that video as well. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. There's a few specific topics to discuss about the original game, but the first and one of the more important ones to learn the story of this game is the identity of the protagonist, Mike Schmidt. It's mostly accepted that Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are the same character. The FNaF movie made some people a bit skeptical, but since Mike in the movie has a younger sister with connections to Baby and a younger brother whose death made Mike feel guilty, it's clear that Mike in the movie, whether actually an Afton or not, is the movie equivalent of Michael Afton. But there's more than just that. In FNaF 2, after beating Night 7, the player, Fritz Smith, is fired for tampering with animatronics and odor, just like Mike in FNaF 1. Taking into account the fact that Smith and Schmidt are technically the same name just from 2 different languages, it seems likely that Fritz Smith and Mike Schmidt are the same person, which implies that this person has some sort of connection to Freddy's and must have some motivation to be here both times. But it goes even deeper. In FNaF 3, which is a whole 30 years after FNaF 1, the protagonist sees hallucinations caused by agony, and these hallucinations are of characters from FNaF 1 and 2, meaning the player has to be someone who has been to those locations. Given the players of 1 and 2 are likely the same, if the player of 3 has been to both locations, he is also probably the same character. Him still going to Freddy's related locations after 30 years indicates that he definitely has some sort of motivation to do so, indicating that he's probably just Michael Afton. But another question to ask is whether or not his motivations are consistent across all 3 locations, or if they change. By the time of FNaF 3, Mike is definitely trying to stop William, but during FNaF 1 and 2, he doesn't seem to be. Mike seems to only learn that Afton was responsible for killing the missing kids during Sister Location, which is after FNaF 1 as I explained in videos before. Therefore, Mike was probably working with Afton during the events of FNaF 2 and 1, but not to help him kill kids. I think Mike helped his dad because he's his dad, and I don't think that he knew Afton was the killer. If he had, Sister Location wouldn't have really mattered for his motivations, and he'd also kind of be a bad guy if that was the case. So he probably wouldn't have been trying to stop the child murderer if he was previously knowingly working with him. A lot of people have also used Mike's reasons for being fired, such as odor, to try to say that Sister Location takes place before FNaF 2, saying the odor is because of Mike being a rotten corpse in those games, placing Sister Location before FNaF 1 and probably by extension FNaF 2. Here's what I said about this in my Sister Location video though. The biggest problem in my opinion with the odor argument is that there are numerous other explanations for the odor. Something a lot of people don't consider is the fact that Michael only gets fired for odor on night 7, the hardest night of all, meaning he can easily have just been stressed out and sweating. And if he was actually a purple corpse, how would he have been hired in the first place? If you are to say that he was just hired because of an interview over the phone, that still doesn't work, because how would he have been fired for odor if nobody ever saw him? And if people did see him, then the odor would not be the reason he is fired. The reason he would be fired is because he's a purple corpse. But there's other explanations for the odor too, such as him simply having poor hygiene, though that one isn't as likely. Another explanation that is perfectly plausible also comes from the pink slip in FNaF 1. Notice how Mike gets fired for both odor and tampering with the animatronics. Him tampering with the animatronics could very well be the actual reason that he has odor, considering they haven't been cleaned, meaning they're dirty and smell bad regardless. Tape Girl in FNaF VR also explains why Mike gets fired in general, as they find out that he knows something and try to silence him by firing him for little things, such as his odor. And that's not even addressing the fact that Mike had odor all the way back in FNaF 1 and 2 when Sister Location wasn't planned. Could Scott have simply used the odor as a plot point for Sister Location? Yeah, but the problem is the double standard here. If the odor from before Sister Location was planned can be used as evidence to say that Sister Location is before FNaF 1, then we can also use the fact that Mike has his normal blue, non-purple, and non-decayed eyes in FNaF 1 as we see on the game over screen where his eyes pop out of the front of the mask. I'm not saying that's good evidence, What I'm saying is that if one thing can be used as evidence, the other thing can too, and they contradict each other. However, there's also the whole idea that Remnant can regenerate you, which I personally believe, which would explain Mike having normal eyes, but at the same time, if Mike regenerated, then he wouldn't be a corpse anymore, and therefore he wouldn't have odor in the first place. No matter what way you look at it, the odor is not viable evidence that sister location is before FNAF 1. This is something I wholeheartedly stand by. I don't really understand why so many people think that sister location happening before FNAF 1 is definitively proven just because Mike smells bad, as if him being a corpse is the only possible answer, especially when sister location was not even planned at the time, meaning there was always another explanation. A lot of people also commented on that sister location video, offering another answer that I honestly don't know why I didn't think about. Scott originally didn't think 420 mode in FNAF 1 was possible, so the odor was likely a nod at sweaty players trying way too hard just to beat this mode. Basically, he was calling people tryhards. The next mystery of FNAF 1 is one that has almost been solved: the year it happened. This is actually something else that I talked about in my video on when sister location takes place, so here's the clip of me talking about that from that video as well. FNAF 1 has been pretty well established by this point to be in 1993. The paycheck lines up with 1993, and although FNAF 2 doesn't really align with this, it would make sense that Night 5 would be on a Friday, which aligns with the date on the paycheck in 1993. The only other years that also match this date fall outside of the time frame that the pay would fall within. It's also worth noting the questionably canon FNAF AR FazFacts, which claim Freddy's pizza recipe was most popular between 1988 and 1993, which implies that to be the time frame that FNAF 1 location was open. Since in FNAF 1's newspapers it is said that Freddy's will close by year's end, that means we are playing in the year that the location closes, and since it's November in FNAF 1, the location is still open but will close very soon. Not to mention the FazFacts also mentioned that the most dangerous job in 1993 was a security guard, which makes sense since Phone Guy died that year. Admittedly, these FazFacts are questionable as they may have been scrapped due to them not being canon. I'm not really sure, but regardless, the date and the paycheck more so imply 1983. The only other option that works is 1992, which is possible as FNAF 2's 1987 calendar matches with 1992 and takes place at the exact same time of year as FNAF 1, but I personally lean more towards 1993, just because I think it makes a bit more sense, especially with stories like the Silver Eyes and Find Player 2 having a theme of returning to Freddy's 10 years after a major event, which makes sense in Michael's case to return 10 years after the bite of 83. So I think it's 1993, but it could also maybe be in 1992. But it is absolutely no sooner or later, and so the point here doesn't change. My opinion on this hasn't really changed. I still think that 1992 works fine, but 1993 makes a little bit more sense to me. But what's also worth noting is the Follow Me minigames from FNAF 3. These minigames show William Afton destroying the core 4 Freddy's animatronics, and based on information from later games and books, we know that this was him taking the endoskeletons out of the original animatronics to put into the fun times. The video on sister location's time placement I've played some clips from was mostly about this topic, so I'm not going to go in depth on why here. But this very much forces the Follow Me minigames to be after FNAF 1, because the possessed animatronic endoskeletons would not be in the FNAF 1 animatronics, and the FNAF 1 animatronics wouldn't be possessed, and if this was before FNAF 1, then FNAF 1 wouldn't have happened. While yes, we do see ghosts of the missing children in the FNAF 3 minigames when Afton gets spring-locked, those are most likely either the remaining agony from the shells, or another option could be that Afton injected himself with the remnant from the missing children, and now parts of them are attached to him. In any case, the Follow Me minigames must take place after the events of FNAF 1, so many people naturally assume they take place in the same year as FNAF 1, whether 92 or in my case 93. But this is not the case. In the FNAF 1 newspapers, it is revealed that due to declining popularity of the restaurant over the years, Freddy's will be closing. The original missing children incident got the first and very popular Freddy shut down, prompting the opening of FNAF 2, which people were excited for despite the previous incidents. However, more children died here, getting it shut down too, and making it the least successful Freddy's due to how little time it was open. However, the third Freddy's, the FNAF 1 location, continued the trend only partially. It started off successful. However, the newspaper suggested its popularity was simply on a downward spiral. It was a successful and well-liked location at first, but the missing children incident from years ago was still causing the restaurant to decline in popularity. Less and less people went to the restaurant. It's also worth noting that FNAF 1 takes place when the restaurant is still open, and we see that the location is very run down by this point, which could have also contributed to the downward spiral. The point is that Freddy's decline in popularity caused the restaurant to shut down. As the newspaper states, it is slated to close by year's end. Basically what this means is that by the end of the year FNAF 1 takes place, the location is set to close. FNAF 1 takes place in November as well, not long before it closes. Basically, the FNAF 1 location is open up to the end of the year, meaning since the location is clearly shut down and long abandoned in the Follow Me minigames, it isn't the same year as FNAF 1. There isn't much of a time constraint, mostly just that it has to be before FNaF 3 and after FNaF 1. There's a few ideas some people go with. One simple option is just the year right after FNaF 1, like 93 or 94, which definitely works, but there's other more specific years that actually have some stuff supporting them. One year some people suggest is 2015, which is much later than most people would probably expect. This idea comes from another idea, one of Fright's stories being in the games. I'm of the opinion that some stories are, but one story I don't believe to be in the games is You're the Band, the third story in the scrapped story compilation Felix the Shark. You're the Band takes place 30 years after the missing children incident, placing it in 2015, 30 years after 1985. In the story, Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica are all still intact and possessed, meaning by this point, Afton has not yet collected remnant from them. People who suggest this story to be in the games would of course suggest this places the Follow Me minigames after this story, in 2015 or later. As I said, I don't believe this story to be in the game, so I don't believe this, but it is an option. The option I personally believe is 1995. William Afton in the Silver Eyes does get springlocked in 1995, and he gets springlocked in Follow Me. It's not a super elaborate reason, it just lines up well. Afton has to be springlocked after 1993 and before 2023, and in the books, he gets springlocked in 1995, which falls within that time frame, so it just makes sense that that's when he gets springlocked in the games too. Not confirmed, but sensical. Moving on now, there's 3 more topics I want to discuss. The next one I want to talk about is Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy in FNaF 1 was a very interesting topic, most notable for the fact that he didn't actually have a reflection, indicating he wasn't actually there. Some took this to mean that Golden Freddy was actually a hallucination. However, after FNaF 1 we got a lot more information about Golden Freddy and it's clear that he is real. However, in FNaF 1 and 2, he is able to just teleport into the office at will. So what exactly is his nature? Well, it's important to recognize that the missing children possess the animatronics by being stuffed into them, and we see Golden Freddy as a performer in the FNaF 3 Stage 01 minigame. The point is that Golden Freddy is a real animatronic, so he isn't really a ghost. Instead, Golden Freddy seems to just be immobile, and the spirit inside is likely projecting itself. The Golden Freddy that attacks us is ghostly because it's not a physical animatronic, rather just a projection of the animatronic. That's also why it doesn't have a reflection, because it's not actually there. Speaking of the children being stuffed, one of the most notable parts of the missing children incident was the lack of bodies. The big issue with the case was that they couldn't find the dead bodies of the missing children. Eventually, as we learned in the newspapers, the animatronics started leaking blood and mucus, which is what led to the restaurant shutting down. However, there's something we need to take into account here. The bodies of the dead children were found, just not publicly, rather by Fazbear Entertainment. In FNaF 2, the ending newspaper reveals that the withered animatronics would be kept for the next Freddy's location, and in FNaF 1, the classics are similar in terms of their color palettes to the withereds, and by now it's very clear that the withereds and the classics are the same animatronics. Basically what happens is Fazbear Entertainment repairs the broken animatronics and uses them again for the FNaF 1 location. If they were to repair the animatronics, they would definitely find those dead bodies. Now, technically speaking, the bodies could have been removed before that, and a case could be made that they probably were, considering it's implied Afton killed the Save Them children while wearing Golden Freddy rather than Spring Bonnie, which would require the absence of the dead body of Cassidy inside. But the point I'm trying to make is that whether the bodies were found here or earlier, they were found. Also, while we obviously wouldn't be shown a dead body in a game, it's definitely worth noting that when we open FNaF 1 Freddy's chest in FNaF VR, there's no dead body in there. But there's things inside the body like a shoe, watch, and a hat that may have belonged to the dead child that was once there. The fact that we have to actually open this thing seems to indicate that it's actively trying to show us that the body isn't here. Basically what I'm saying is that Fazbear Entertainment did find the dead bodies of the children, but despite that, they didn't do anything about it. Kinda goes to show that Fazbear Entertainment doesn't need William Afton in order to be evil. And this one also leads me to the last thing I want to talk about for this video. One word that has created debate since the first FNaF game released and is still talked about quite often. Yes, one word. Just one. One single word. Convicted. In the FNaF 1 newspapers, it is stated that the person who lured the 5 children to the back room has been convicted, but that does not line up with what we are told later on in the series. At least, not everything. Of course, some things line up. As I said earlier, I do believe some Fazbear Fright stories take place in the game's timeline, and one of the stories I personally believe to be in the games is Find Player 2, and in that story, a man named Emmett Tucker is suspected to have kidnapped a child and attempted to kidnap another. However, it's stated that it was never proven that he kidnapped a former kid, but he still went to prison for the attempted kidnapping of the latter kid. However, he wasn't suspected of kidnapping any other kids, so if the newspaper claiming someone was convicted was saying they got the wrong guy, it probably wasn't Tucker. But given Tucker ended up being innocent, it adds merit to the idea that they did indeed get the wrong guy. But there's a problem with that. The Silver Eyes in FNaF VR 100% confirmed that the man arrested for the missing children incident was in fact William Afton himself. But what's weirder is that he was not convicted. He was let go. As specifically stated in the Silver Eyes, everyone knew Afton was the one who killed the missing children. The problem was, they couldn't find the bodies, and without the bodies, they couldn't prove he killed them. Sure, some of the things in the books are different from how they are in the games, but we know for a fact that this is not one of those things. In FNaF VR, one of the death screen messages references this very thing from the Silver Eyes, and says, "Nothing was ever proven in a court of law." Not to mention, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure this message commonly appears after you die playing the FNaF 3 levels of FNaF VR, the levels with Springtrap, William Afton. So yeah, the FNaF 1 newspaper is actually wrong. It's questionable why this is the case though. Maybe it was changed as the story progressed, maybe it was somehow worded wrong in FNaF 1, maybe the newspaper deliberately lied to the public to put them at ease and prevent them from believing there was still a child murderer on the streets. Probably not legal, but you never know. Regardless, Afton was arrested but not convicted. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Obviously, there's more FNaF 1 adjacent mysteries out there that I didn't talk about in this video or the phone guy video, but these are the main ones I wanted to talk about. But let me know what you guys think, and if there are any other topics that I missed, let me know, and maybe I'll do another video if there's enough stuff for me to talk about. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys!